The council chamber was the largest room on the station. Its walls curved upward to a ceiling made of transparent crystal, showing the endless stars beyond. Representatives from every major species sat in a circle around the raised platform. Dragons occupied the positions of honor, their scales gleaming under the lights. Karin stood beside Elena on the platform, trying not to tremble. He had never been in this room before. He had never stood before so many powerful beings. And from the way they looked at him, he could tell they already knew about his failures. The High Counselor, an ancient dragon named Vethros, spoke first. His voice was like thunder. "Dr. Vasquez, you have been conducting unauthorized excavations in the lower levels of this station. You have removed artifacts without permission. And you have involved a citizen of Clan Virith in your activities without consulting his family." He turned his cold gaze to Karin. A citizen who has not yet passed his trials of cognition, I might add. Elena stood tall despite the hostility around her. "High Counselor, with respect, the artifacts I have documented were forgotten, abandoned. No one was studying them. No one cared about them until I showed that they were responding to interaction." A Cathari representative clicked its mandibles in what might have been laughter. "Responding? You mean the lights flickered? This is not a scientific breakthrough, human. This is wishful thinking." "The sphere communicated with us," Elena insisted. "It asked questions." Karin answered them. "And it showed us a path to something deeper in the ruins. That is not a flickering light. That is contact with an ancient civilization." The chamber erupted in dismissive sounds. Clicking, hissing, rumbling. Karin felt his heart sink. They did not believe her. They would never believe her. A Morlith floated forward in its water-filled hover sphere. "Even if your claims were true, Dr. Vasquez, you lack the qualifications to lead such research. You are human. Your species has been traveling between stars for less than 400 years. We have been doing so for millennia. If there is something of value in those ruins, proper scholars should study it. Not a primitive and a defective child." The word hit Karin like a blow. Defective. Even here, even now. That was all anyone saw when they looked at him. But Elena did not back down. "Proper scholars have had thousands of years to study architect ruins across the galaxy," she said, her voice sharp. "And none of you have made any progress. Your perfect memories cannot decode their language. Your advanced technology cannot activate their machines. Do you know why?" She pulled out her datapad and projected images onto the air above the platform. The chamber fell silent as they saw the sphere, the symbols, the patterns Karin had discovered. "The architects did not design their systems to be analyzed," Elena continued. "They designed them to be experienced. Their language is not logical. It is emotional, spatial, intuitive. Every species here has tried to approach them as a puzzle to be solved with pure intellect. And every species here has failed." She gestured to Karin. But Karin succeeded. Not despite his differences, but because of them. His mind works in ways that your rigid tests cannot measure. He felt what the architects were asking. He understood them not through memory, but through connection. The High Counselor leaned forward. "You are suggesting that this child, who cannot pass the simplest examination, achieve something that our greatest scholars could not?" "Yes," Elena said simply. "That is exactly what I am suggesting." The chamber exploded into arguments. Species shouted at each other. Some demanded that Elena be expelled from the station. Others called for the artifacts to be seized and studied by qualified experts. In the chaos, Karin saw a familiar figure push through the crowd. His brother Sether walked onto the platform, his scales bright with anger. "This is absurd," Sether declared, his voice cutting through the noise. "My brother is a failure. Everyone knows this. He brings shame to our family with every breath he takes. And now you want the council to believe that he is somehow special? That his weakness is actually a strength? He turned to face Corin directly. You should have stayed hidden in your tunnels, brother. You should have let our family forget you existed. Instead, you have embarrassed us before the entire Concord. Corin felt tears forming in his eyes. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide. He wanted to disappear into the maintenance tunnels and never come out. But then Elena stepped in front of him, putting herself between him and Sether. I have heard enough, she said quietly. You call him a failure because he cannot do what you do. But have you ever considered that he can do things you cannot? Sether laughed. What could he possibly do that I cannot? He can listen, Elena said. He can feel. He can connect with something so ancient that your perfect memory cannot even recognize it as communication. She shook her head. You have spent your whole life being told you are superior. But superiority is not the same as worth. And intellect is not the only kind of intelligence. The chamber slowly quieted. The High Counselor raised a claw for silence. Enough, Thethro said. This debate achieves nothing. Dr. Vasquez, your project will be granted a provisional extension. You may continue your research for 3 more months, under observation. If you produce results, we will discuss further support. If not, you will surrender all artifacts and leave the station. Elena nodded. That is all I ask. A chance to prove what we have found. As the council session ended and beings began to leave, Corin remained still on the platform. Elena came to stand beside him. I am sorry about your brother, she said softly. Corin wiped his eyes. He is not wrong about me. I am a failure. Every test I take proves it. Elena sat down on the edge of the platform and patted the space beside her. Corin hesitated, then said, Let me tell you something about humans, Elena said. A few centuries ago, my species nearly destroyed itself. War, disease, environmental collapse. We came very close to extinction. Corin looked at her. He had never heard this story. Do you know how we survived? Elena continued. It was not because we were the smartest. It was not because we had the best technology. It was because we refused to give up on each other. She smiled sadly. We had a saying back then. No one left behind. It meant that every person mattered, even the ones who did not fit. Especially the ones who did not fit. She put her hand on Corin's arm. The galaxy looks at humans and sees primitives. Simple creatures who got lucky. But our greatest strength has never been our intelligence. It is our ability to see value in every individual. To believe that everyone has something to contribute, even if we cannot see it yet. Corin thought about her words. Your people truly believe this. The best of us do, Elena said. And I believe it about you, Corin. I do not know exactly what you are capable of, but I know it is something important. Something the galaxy needs. She stood and offered him her hand. So what do you say? Are you ready to prove them all wrong? Corin looked at her hand. He thought about his brother's words, about the council's skepticism, about all the years he had spent believing he was worthless. Then he thought about the sphere, and the question it had asked, and the answer he had given. I seek purpose. Maybe this was his purpose. Maybe this strange human woman was right about him. Maybe the things that made him different were not weaknesses at all. He took her hand and stood. Yes, he said. I am ready. Corin pressed his back against the cold metal wall and tried to make himself small. The maintenance tunnel was dark and smelled like rust, but it was safe. No one came here. No one would find him and ask questions he could not answer. Above him, through the grated floor panels, he could hear the sounds of the station. Voices speaking in a dozen languages. The hum of machines. The click of claws on polished floors. The Galactic Concord station never slept. Millions of beings lived here, representatives of every major species in known space. And among them, the dragons were considered the greatest. His people had earned that reputation over thousands of years. Dragons possessed perfect memories. They could recall every word they had ever read, every number they had ever seen. Their analytical minds could solve problems that left other species confused for generations. When the galaxy needed scholars, scientists, or historians, they called upon the dragons. Corin was a dragon, but he was not like the others. He had failed the trials of cognition 7 times. 7. No dragon in recorded history had failed more than twice. The trials tested memory, analysis, and recall. Every dragon child was expected to pass by their 50th year. Corin was 49, and he had one more chance remaining. But he knew, deep in his heart, that he would fail again. His mind simply did not work the way it should. When he tried to memorize the star charts, the numbers became fuzzy and slipped away like water through his claws. When he attempted to recite the 40,000 verses of the Draconic Code, the words tangled together and came out wrong. His teachers had tried everything. Extra lessons. Special techniques. Nothing helped. His family had stopped trying years ago. Corin's father was a senior archivist, one of the most respected positions a dragon could hold. His mother served on the Concord Council itself. His eldest brother, Sether, had passed his trials on the first attempt with the highest scores in a century. His sisters were equally brilliant, and then there was Corin, the broken one. The shame that his mother no longer spoke his name at family gatherings. When relatives asked about him, she would change the subject. His father looked at him with tired disappointment. Sether pretended he did not exist, so Corin had learned to disappear. He found the forgotten places of the station, the areas that maintenance robots cleaned, but no one visited. The old storage rooms, the abandoned archive wings, the tunnels that ran between the walls. He spent his days there, away from the pitying looks and whispered comments. Tonight, he had discovered a new place. An archive wing that had been sealed decades ago when the station expanded. The door had been stuck, but Corin was small for a dragon, and he had squeezed through a gap in the wall. Inside, he found rows of old data terminals covered in dust, and walls lined with physical books that no one had touched in years. It was perfect, quiet, empty. His or so he thought. A sound made him freeze. Footsteps. And a voice, talking in a language his translator identified as Terran Standard, human. Corin moved silently between the shelves, his scales helping him blend into the shadows. He peered around a corner and saw something unexpected. A human woman stood near the far wall, covered in dust from head to toe. She wore thick gloves and had tools hanging from her belt. Her hair was tied back in a messy bundle, and she was talking to herself while examining a broken wall panel. No, that's not right, she muttered. The stress patterns don't match. This wasn't structural failure. Someone sealed this deliberately. She pulled out a small device and scanned the wall. Interesting. Very interesting. Corin watched her with curiosity. Humans were rare on the station. They were newcomers to galactic society, having only achieved faster-than-light travel a few centuries ago. Most species considered them primitive, clever in their own way, perhaps, but lacking the mental gifts of dragons or the technological sophistication of the Kethri or the psychic abilities of the Morlith. Humans were tolerated, but rarely respected. This human did not seem to care about any of that. She worked with focused intensity, completely absorbed in whatever she was doing. She must have sensed his presence, because she suddenly turned and looked directly at him. Corin flinched, expecting anger or fear. Instead, the human smiled. "Hello there," she said. "Didn't mean to intrude on your hiding spot. I'm Elena, Dr. Elena Vasquez, archaeologist." Corin stepped out from behind a shelf, feeling foolish. "I am Corin, of Clan Virith." He hesitated, then added, "I should not be here either. Elena laughed. It was a warm sound, without mockery. Then we're both trespassers. Good. I could use some company. She gestured at the wall. I've been trying to find a way into the lower levels for months. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. The lower levels? Corin asked. The original station, Elena explained. This whole place was built on top of something much older. Architect ruins. You know about the architects? Corin nodded slowly. Every species knew the stories. The architects were a civilization that had existed millions of years ago, before any current species had evolved. They had built structures across the galaxy, and then vanished without explanation. Their ruins were found on many worlds, but no one had ever decoded their language or understood their technology. The Concord built this station directly on top of an architect's site, Elena continued. And nobody has ever properly studied what's underneath. They just paved it over and forgot about it. She shook her head in disbelief. Can you imagine? The greatest archaeological find in this sector, and they're using it as a foundation. Why do you care? Corin asked. You are human. The other species say humans are. He stopped, embarrassed. Primitive? Simple? Not smart enough to understand important things? Elena finished for him. She did not seem offended. I've heard it all, Corin, and I don't care what they think. I care about finding answers. She looked at him more closely then, tilting her head. What about you? Why are you hiding in abandoned archive wings? Corin felt his scales flush with shame. I am not. I cannot. He struggled to find the words. I am not a proper dragon. My mind does not work correctly. I fail every examination. My family considers me a disgrace. He expected her to look at him with pity, or worse, to laugh. But Elena just nodded thoughtfully. Interesting, she said. I've been looking for an assistant. Someone who can fit through collapsed tunnels. Someone who isn't afraid of dust and darkness. Someone that the important people won't miss. She smiled again. You wouldn't happen to be interested, would you? Corin stared at her. No one had ever asked for his help before. No one had ever looked at him and seen anything but failure. Why would you want me? He asked. Elena shrugged. Because you're here. Because you're curious. And because I have a feeling about you, Corin of Clan Virith. She held out her hand in the human gesture of greeting. What do you say? Want to help me uncover some ancient secrets? Corin looked at her hand. He thought about his family, who had given up on him. He thought about the trials he would never pass. He thought about all the years he had spent hiding and feeling worthless. Then he reached out and took her hand. Yes, he said. I would like that very much. The passage was narrow and dark. Corin moved through it on his belly, his scales scraping against ancient stone. Behind him, Elena's flashlight created a small circle of light that bounced off the walls. You're doing great, Elena called from behind. Just a little further. My scanner says there's an open space ahead. Corin did not answer. He was too focused on moving forward. The tunnel had been sealed for thousands of years, maybe longer. Dust filled his nostrils. Strange markings covered the walls, symbols that his translator could not read. Architect writing. For 3 weeks now, he had been helping Elena explore the lower levels of the station. They worked in secret, during the hours when most beings slept. Elena had explained that she had requested official assistance many times. But every species had rejected her. The dragons had called her research quaint, and suggested she focus on something more appropriate for a human mind. The insectoid Kethri had laughed at her lack of advanced scanning equipment. The aquatic Morlith had claimed she lacked the cognitive capacity to understand what she might find. Even the station administrators had told her to stop wasting their time, but Elena had not given up. She had continued alone, mapping the ruins inch by inch. And now she had Corin. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Corin pulled himself through and stood up, brushing dust from his scales. A moment later, Elena emerged behind him, grinning despite the dirt on her face. "Look at this place," she whispered. The chamber was circular, with a domed ceiling that rose high above them. The walls were covered in architect symbols, thousands of them, spiraling upward in complex patterns. In the center of the room stood a single pedestal, untouched by time. On the pedestal sat a crystalline sphere about the size of a human head. It glowed faintly, pulsing with soft blue light. "Incredible," Elena breathed. She approached the sphere slowly, pulling out her scanner. "This is still active. After millions of years, it's still powered." Corin followed her, but his attention was not on the sphere. He was looking at the walls. The symbols there seemed to move in the flickering light of Elena's flashlight. They made him feel something strange. Not fear, exactly. More like recognition. As if he had seen them before in a dream. "Elena," he said, "look at these markings. Do you see how they connect?" Elena glanced up from her scanner. "What do you mean?" Corin pointed. "There and there. The same symbol repeats at each junction. And the spacing between them matches the distances between the corridors we passed through to get here." He walked along the wall, tracing the patterns with his claw. "I think this is a map. Not of the station. Of something underneath it." Elena stared at him. "Corin, I've been studying these symbols for 2 years. Every linguistic analysis program I have says they're random. Decorative. How can you see a pattern?" Corin felt his scales flush. "I do not know. I just feel it. The way the air moves here, the way the sounds echo. It all connects to these markings somehow." He shook his head. "I am probably wrong. I am not good at reading things." "No," Elena said firmly. "Don't dismiss yourself like that." She walked over to stand beside him. "Show me. What else do you see?" For the next hour, Corin walked through the chamber, pointing out things he noticed. The way certain symbols were placed near air vents. The subtle differences in color that indicated older and newer markings. The emotional weight of some symbols compared to others. Elena recorded everything, her excitement growing with each observation. "Corin, do you understand what you're doing?" She finally asked. "You're not memorizing these symbols. You're reading them, but not the way a dragon normally reads. You're using something else. Spatial awareness, intuition, empathy. That is not proper analysis," Corin said. "That is guessing." "Maybe for your people, it's considered guessing," Elena replied. "But for humans, it's one of our most important skills. We call it pattern recognition. It's how we survived when we were still primitive. We couldn't outrun predators or outfight them. But we could look at the world and understand how things connected, even when we couldn't explain why." She put her hand on his arm. "Your brain isn't broken, Corin. It's just built for a different kind of knowing." Corin did not know what to say. All his life, he had been told that his mind was defective, that his inability to memorize and recall made him useless. No one had ever suggested that he might simply be different rather than wrong. He turned back to the sphere on the pedestal. Now that he was paying attention, he could feel something from it. A vibration. A resonance. It was not speaking in words, but it was asking something. A question. "Elena," he said slowly, "I think this sphere is waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For an answer." He stepped closer. The architects did not build this to be decoded like a book. They built it to be experienced like a conversation. They were asking questions, and they wanted someone to respond. Elena's scanner beeped. She looked at the readings, and her eyes widened. "Corin, the sphere just increased its activity level. It's responding to you." The blue light pulsed brighter. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift. Corin reached out toward the sphere, not quite touching it. He closed his eyes and tried to listen with something deeper than his ears. The question became clearer. Not words, but meaning. The architects were asking, "Who are you? Why are you here? What do you seek?" He answered without speaking. "I am Corin. I am broken by my people's standards. I am here because I want to understand. I seek purpose." The sphere pulsed once, twice. Then it went still. Elena grabbed his arm. "What happened? What did you do?" "I answered them," Corin said. "They were asking who we are. I told them the truth, and—" Corin opened his eyes. The chamber looked different now. Some of the symbols on the walls had changed color, forming a new pattern. A path. "I think they want to show us something," he said. "Something deeper. Something important." Elena looked at the new pattern, then at Corin. Her face was filled with wonder. "Do you know what this means?" she asked. Every scholar who has ever studied architect ruins has failed to get any response. Dragons, Kethri, Morleth, all of them with their perfect memories and advanced technology. And you just had a conversation with a million-year-old artifact by feeling your way through it. Corin thought about his brother Sether with his perfect exam scores. He thought about all the dragon scholars who had been praised and honored for their brilliant minds. None of them could have done what he just did. Not because they were not smart enough, but because they would never have thought to try. "What do we do now?" he asked. Elena smiled and started photographing the new pattern on the walls. "Now we follow the path. And we find out what the architects wanted the galaxy to discover." She looked back at him, her eyes bright with determination. "But first, we're going to need more supplies. And probably some better equipment. Because I have a feeling we've only scratched the surface of what's down here." Corin nodded. For the first time in his life, he felt something strange and unfamiliar growing in his chest. It was hope. The deeper levels of the ruins were different. The air was older here, thick with dust that had not moved in ages. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, responding to their presence. Corin led the way, following the path that only he could see. 2 months had passed since the council meeting. Elena and Corin had worked without rest, mapping the lower chambers and documenting everything they found. The crystalline sphere had become their guide, pulsing with light whenever they moved in the right direction. "We are close," Corin said. He could feel it in his bones. Something waited ahead. Something important. Elena checked her scanner. "The readings are off the charts. Whatever is generating this energy, it's massive." They turned a corner and stopped. Before them was a door unlike anything they had seen. It stretched from floor to ceiling, covered in symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. The air around it hummed with power. "This is it," Elena whispered. "The heart of the architect complex." Corin approached the door slowly. He pressed his claw against the surface and closed his eyes. The symbols were asking the same question as before, but more urgently now. "Who are you? Why do you seek what is hidden?" He answered with his feelings. "We seek understanding. We want to learn what you left behind. We believe your knowledge should not be forgotten." The door began to glow. The symbols aligned into a new pattern. A soft click echoed through the chamber. The door opened. Beyond it was darkness. Elena shone her flashlight inside, revealing a vast space that their light could not fully illuminate. They stepped through together, hearts pounding. The chamber activated the moment they entered. Lights flickered on along the walls, ancient systems waking after millions of years of sleep. And in the center of the room, floating in the air, was a sphere 10 times larger than the one they had found before. "Incredible," Elena breathed. "This is a central hub. A control center, maybe. Or a library." Corin walked toward the large sphere, drawn by something he could not explain. But before he could reach it, alarms began to sound throughout the ruins. Not their alarms. Ancient ones. Architect warnings. "Something's wrong," Elena said, checking her scanner frantically. "The systems are detecting intruders." Multiple signatures coming from above. Corin's blood ran cold. He knew what that meant. The council. They sent someone else. They heard voices echoing through the tunnels. Dragon voices. And leading them, unmistakable in its arrogance, was the voice of Sether. "Spread out," Sether commanded. "Find the human and my brother." The council has decided this research is too important to leave in their hands. Elena grabbed Corin's arm. "We need to hide. If they find us here," but it was too late. Dragon scholars poured into the chamber, their scales gleaming with excitement at what they had found. Sether stood at the front, looking around with greedy eyes. Well, he said when he spotted Corin and Elena. "You actually found something. I'm almost impressed, brother." "You cannot be here," Corin said. "The architect systems respond to intention. If you approach them with greed or force..." "Enough," Sether interrupted. "You have had your chance to play explorer. Now step aside and let real scholars do their work." The dragon scholars ignored Elena's protests and approached the central sphere. They pulled out scanning devices and began taking readings, talking excitedly among themselves. "Remarkable energy signatures," one said. "The data storage capacity alone must be immeasurable. If we can decode the access protocols, we will have technology beyond anything in the Concord," another added. Sether smiled. "Begin extraction procedures. We will bring this back to the surface for proper study." "No," Corin shouted. He tried to run toward them, but other dragons held him back. "You do not understand. The architects did not design this to be taken. It must be experienced. It must be answered." Sether laughed. "Answered? Brother, you have spent too much time with the human. Technology does not ask questions. It simply works or it does not work. And we will make it work." The scholars attached devices to the sphere and began feeding commands into it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything went wrong. The sphere pulsed with angry red light. The symbols on the walls shifted into warning patterns, and the chamber doors slammed shut with a sound like thunder. Ancient defense systems activated. Energy barriers sprang up around the sphere, trapping the dragon scholars inside. The air crackled with power. "What is happening?" Sether shouted. "Turn it off." "We cannot," a scholar cried. "The systems are not responding to our commands." Corin felt the architect's anger through the connection he had built with them. They had been violated. Beings had come not to understand, but to take. Not to learn, but to exploit. And so they had sealed their treasures away again. But this time, they had sealed the intruders inside with it. The energy barriers began to contract. The scholars backed away from the sphere, but there was nowhere to go. In minutes, the barriers would crush them. "We have to help them," Elena said. Corin looked at his brother trapped behind the barrier. Sether, who had mocked him, who had called him a disgrace, who had wished he would disappear. Why? Corin asked bitterly. He would not help me. Elena grabbed his shoulders and turned him to face her. Because that is not who you are, Corin. You are not like them. You do not leave people behind, even people who have hurt you. That is your strength. That is what makes you different. Corin closed his eyes. She was right. He knew she was right. He could feel the architect's systems listening, waiting to see what he would do. He stepped toward the barrier. "Let me through," he said to the ancient systems. "I need to help them." The symbols on the walls flickered. The architects were confused. These intruders had violated their sanctuary. Why would Corin protect them? Because they are still people, Corin answered with his feelings. Because even those who hurt me deserve a chance to learn. Because forgiveness is stronger than anger. A gap opened in the barrier. Corin stepped through. Inside, the dragon scholars were panicking. Some had fallen to their knees. Others were trying desperately to break through the barrier with their claws. Sether stood frozen, staring at his younger brother. Corin? How did you? There is no time, Corin said. The systems responded to your intentions. You came to take, not to understand. That is why they turned against you. And how do we stop them? Corin looked at his brother. You have to trust me. Follow my lead. Do exactly what I say, even if it makes no sense. Sether hesitated. His whole life, he had believed he was superior. He had never followed anyone, certainly not his failure of a brother. The barriers contracted further. They had seconds left. Sether, Corin said firmly. Trust me. Something changed in his brother's eyes. For the first time, Sether looked at Corin not with contempt, but with something approaching respect. All right, he said quietly. I trust you. Corin reached out to the architect systems once more. He let them feel his intentions. Mercy, understanding, forgiveness. He asked them to see that these beings were not evil, only ignorant. They could learn. They could change. Please, he asked. Give them another chance. The systems hummed. The symbols shifted. And slowly, the barriers began to retract. The scholars gasped with relief. Several collapsed to the ground, shaking. Sether stood very still, staring at his brother as if seeing him for the first time. How did you do that? He whispered. Corin looked at him. I asked, and I meant it. The doors to the chamber opened. Elena rushed in and grabbed Corin in a tight embrace. You did it, she said. You saved them. Corin nodded, suddenly exhausted. But through the tiredness, he felt something else. Pride. He had done something no one else could do. He had saved lives using the very gifts his people had called weaknesses. Sether approached slowly. He stood before Corin for a long moment, and then did something Corin had never seen him do. He bowed his head. Brother, he said, I was wrong about you. I was wrong about many things. It was not an apology. Dragons rarely apologized. But it was an acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. We should leave, Elena said. The council will want to know what happened here. As they made their way back to the surface, Corin glanced back at the central chamber. The great sphere pulsed gently, its light warm and welcoming once more. He had proven himself. But he knew this was only the beginning. The council chamber was full again, but the atmosphere was different this time. Gone were the dismissive looks and mocking whispers. The representatives of every species sat in attentive silence as Elena presented her findings. The architects were not a single species, she explained, projecting images of the symbols and artifacts they had discovered. They were a collective. Dozens of different beings from across the galaxy who came together millions of years ago. Their civilization was built on one fundamental principle: complementary differences. She let that sink in before continuing. Their technology was deliberately designed to require multiple types of minds working together. No single species could operate it alone. A being with perfect memory could activate certain functions. A being with spatial intuition could navigate others. A being with emotional intelligence could communicate with the systems. Only when all these abilities combined could the full potential be unlocked. The High Council of Vethros leaned forward. You are saying the architects intentionally made their technology impossible for any one species to use? Yes, Elena said. They believed that isolation and superiority were dangers to any civilization. So they designed their legacy to force cooperation, to force different peoples to work together and value each other's strengths. She gestured to Corin, who stood beside her. Corin's unique neurology allowed him to communicate with their systems in ways that traditional analysis never could. But even he could not have unlocked everything alone. We worked together. Human adaptability and dragon intuition. That is what the architects wanted. A Kethri representative clicked thoughtfully. And the incident in the lower chamber? The defense systems? The systems responded to intention, Elena explained. When scholars approached with the goal of taking and exploiting, the systems defended themselves. When Corin approached with understanding and mercy, they opened. She paused. The architects left us a test, not just of our intelligence, but of our character. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, Elena projected one final image. Coordinates. Star map showing a location far beyond explored space. This is what the architects left us, she said. The location of their true homeworld. A place untouched for millions of years, filled with technology and knowledge we cannot imagine. The central sphere shared these coordinates after Corin saved the scholars who had violated their sanctuary. The architects rewarded mercy with their greatest secret. The chamber erupted in excited discussion. Representatives talked over each other, already imagining the possibilities. Vethros raised a claw for silence. And who would lead an expedition to this location? Elena looked at Corin. Corin looked back at her. They had discussed this many times in the weeks since the incident. We would, Elena said. Corin and myself. The architects designed their homeworld the same way they designed everything else. It will require diverse minds working together. Traditional scholars alone will not be able to access its secrets. You are asking the Council to entrust the greatest discovery in galactic history to a human and a dragon who cannot pass basic examinations. Amorlith asked skeptically. I am asking the Council to learn from what we have discovered, Elena replied firmly. The architects built a civilization that lasted for millions of years. We have been fighting among ourselves for centuries. Maybe their approach has something to teach us. The debate continued for hours. Species argued over resources, over credits, over who would get access to what they might find. But in the end, the decision was made. Elena and Corin would lead the expedition. They would assemble their own crew. After the session ended, Corin walked through the corridors of the station, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. A few months ago, he had been hiding in maintenance tunnels, believing he was worthless. Now he was about to lead an expedition that could change the galaxy. A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead of him. His mother Dot, she was old for a dragon, her scales faded with age. She had not spoken to him directly in years. Corin stopped, not sure what to expect. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then, his mother spoke. Corin. Just his name. But it was the first time she had said it in so long. She did not apologize for ignoring him. She did not say she was proud of him. Dragons did not express emotions that way, but she had said his name. She had acknowledged in Dot. It was not forgiveness. But it was a start. Corin nodded to her and continued walking. He found Elena in her small research office, packing equipment and going through lists of supplies. We need to start assembling a crew, she said when he entered. The Council is giving us a ship, but we need people to run it. What kind of people? Corin asked. Elena smiled. The same kind as us. Misfits, outcasts. Beings that other species have dismissed or undervalued. If the architects designed their world for diverse minds working together, we need the most diverse crew we can find. Over the following weeks, they spread the word quietly. They were looking for beings who did not fit in. Beings with unusual abilities. Beings who had been told they were wrong or broken, They came slowly at first. A Cathary engineer whose unconventional methods had gotten her expelled from the Technical Academy. A Morlith pilot who processed information through emotion rather than calculation. A young human mechanic who could fix anything but could not explain how. Others followed. Dozens of them, from species across the Concord. Each one had been rejected by their own people. Each one had been told they were failures. Elena welcomed them all. The ship was called the Second Chance. It was not the newest or fastest vessel in the Concord fleet, but it was solid and reliable. Elena and Corin stood on the loading dock, watching their crew prepare for departure. "Are you ready for this?" Elena asked. Corin thought about the question. A year ago, he would have said no. He would have said he was not ready for anything, that he was just a broken dragon waiting to be forgotten. But he was not that person anymore. "Yes," he said. "I am ready." Footsteps approached from behind. Corin turned and saw Sether walking toward them, carrying a small travel bag. "Brother," Corin said carefully, "what are you doing here?" Sether stopped a few paces away. He looked uncomfortable, which was strange to see on someone who had always been so confident. "I have spent my entire life being told I was superior," Sether said quietly. "The smartest. The best. I believed it. I looked down on everyone who could not match my abilities." He paused. "And then you saved my life using gifts I cannot understand and do not possess." Corin waited. "I was wrong," Sether continued. "About you. About many things. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I would like to come with you, to learn, to understand what you and the human have discovered." Corin looked at Elena. She shrugged in that way humans did, leaving the choice to him. He thought about all the years of pain, all the times Sether had mocked him, all the shame and loneliness. Then he thought about what Elena had taught him, about not leaving people behind, about giving everyone a chance to grow and change. "You can come," Corin said, "but you will work alongside everyone else. You will not give orders. You will listen and learn." Sether nodded. "I understand. Good." Corin gestured toward the ship. "Find a bunk. We leave soon." As Sether walked up the ramp, Elena put her hand on Corin's shoulder. "That was generous of you." "It was human of me," Corin said with a small smile. Elena laughed. "I think that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." They boarded the Second Chance together. The crew gathered in the main hold. Beings from a dozen different species, all of them different, all of them valuable. Elena addressed them all. "The galaxy has told each of you that you do not matter," she said, "that your differences make you less. But the architects knew better. They knew that diversity is strength, that the minds others reject are often the minds that see what no one else can." She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. "We are going somewhere no one has been in millions of years. We will face challenges that no single mind can solve. But together, as a crew of misfits and outcasts, we will unlock secrets the galaxy has forgotten." The crew cheered. The engines hummed to life. The ship rose from the dock and turned toward the stars. Corin stood at a window, watching the station grow smaller behind them. He thought about everything he had learned. About Elena and her belief in him. About the architects and their wisdom. About his own journey from failure to leader. The galaxy measured worth through exams and ranks and rigid standards. It valued conformity over creativity, perfection over uniqueness. But the humans had taught him a different truth. A truth the architects had known long before. Any current species existed. The ones who do not fit are often the ones who change everything. Second Chance jumped to faster than light speed and disappeared into the endless dark, carrying its crew of misfits toward a future none of them could imagine. But whatever waited for them out there, they would face it together. and that made all the difference.